I'm here with Arjun Khemani. Arjun is another of Conjecture Institute's fellows, an 18-year-old high school dropout, and I'm sure we'll get to discussing the benefits and perhaps any disadvantages of dropping out of high school so early on. He helped launch and support Naval Ravikant with Airchat, a social media platform that existed for a little while. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little as well. At the moment, he's creating a documentary about our deepest theory of knowledge. In general, he works to spread optimism and fight the enemies of civilization, and is an enthusiast of all things cryptocurrency and especially Zcash. Welcome, Arjun.
It's great to be here, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Let's begin with your documentary. That's one of the things that Conjecture Institute is helping with, so far as I understand. It's about our deepest theory of knowledge, something that I talk about quite a bit. But tell us a bit about what that theory of knowledge is in your mind and why outreach, like a documentary, for example, is warranted.
Well, yeah, as you know, it's Karl Popper and David Deutsch's theory of knowledge and epistemology. I think the reason I wanted to do that is because obviously The Beginning of Infinity is an amazing book. It's perhaps the book that's had the most impact on my worldview. And you did a great job summarizing each chapter and expanding on each chapter and just making it more accessible to the general public. Because David, he's a great writer, but he doesn't really, I don't think the broader public really grasps some of the language in the book the first time, so they got to read it like again and again. And like a lot of my friends say they've read the book, but they don't really understand it. So I told them, check out Brett's podcast. So I really wanted to put it in a format that's more accessible for people and just make those ideas easier to understand. David does a great job. It's just like he uses language such as like knowledge and problems and fun, even the word fun, in so different meanings that if you don't really for me at least, I took like many tries and used your podcast on the side to gain deeper insights. So just trying to condense that into a visual format that's appealing to people. That's kind of the goal of the documentary.
Yeah, it was amazing for me to see. I mean, it was some years ago now when I was explaining these ideas to everyone of every age. And, I was a school teacher at the time, and even explaining to my own students, the overwhelming majority of people didn't seem to understand the significance of it, let alone understand the granular detail of what David was saying, the importance of Karl Popper's epistemology. There was a subject called the theory of knowledge, as you know, in the International Baccalaureate, which isn't really about theory of knowledge as we understand it. It was astonishing for me to encounter you online as being such a young person. I think you would have been 15, 16 at the time, and you were really engaging with the ideas. You got it. You seemed to get it at a fundamentally deep level early on. Is that because you read the book over and over again? Were you just really fascinated by the ideas? Because it is rare, in my experience, to get someone who reads the book and then just goes, well, I get it. But you got it. How did that happen? Have you got any advice for other people?
Well, no advice, but I'll tell you my path. It was, I was a huge Naval fan, still am, but I read, I think I saw your podcast with him on his podcast, and I think this is also like a path of many other people, who've now read Deutsch and understand him and stuff. So I first listened to your podcast, even though that was very rudimentary, but so fundamental, I would say I got 60% of that, right? The 40% just went over my head. And then Naval recommended you have this entire series and you did deep dives into each chapter. So I thought, okay, I'll do this. So I ordered The Beginning of Infinity from Amazon and started reading it. And after I read the first chapter, or maybe I listened to your your podcast episode first, and I was like, whoa, this guy's talking about some deep stuff. I don't think I've ever heard these ideas before. And they sort of seem really fundamental, more fundamental than some of the stuff I was interested in before, which is astrophysics and just the universe being overwhelmingly large. But this was our role in the universe, and it was surprisingly optimistic. It was, it's not just like, oh, this is like a huge universe and humans don't matter, which was like kind of my view before that. And then yeah, I don't think I read it a lot. It just like, I was listening to a podcast and it all just clicked really. I would say though, if I didn't have your podcast, it'd be significantly harder.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, you do need other people. And as I've often told the story, luckily there was an online community when the book was first published, the same with The Fabric of Reality, where we got to share ideas and questions, and there was just emails backwards and forwards. And because such communities are kind of they've been replaced by things like X and Facebook and whatever else where people are discussing it now. There needed to be some sort of central place, and so I suppose that's what Talkcast served. But what Talkcast isn't is a documentary, a polished kind of way of summarising some of these optimistic ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of making the documentary? How do you even begin? This is something that's outside of my wheelhouse. What do you do in terms of writing it, in terms of filming what you need to do, and just the general process of putting it together? How do you decide what to put in, what to leave out?
Yeah, it's a big process, and obviously I'm not alone in this. Logan Shipkin has helped me a lot with writing the script, and we co-wrote it together. It was, and I'm also like not really a professional at this, right? I'm just trying it out. It's my first time making anything like this, and so I think the way it all started was kind of ad hoc. I was like, okay, this, and people in the community also like really wanted this documentary. Everyone's been talking about it. I don't know if you know, but David tweeted this a while ago. He'd always wanted to create a sequel to The Ascent of Man by Jacob Bronowski, but nobody was interested for the longest time. So he kind of just gave up on the idea, and he's not interested anymore. So I was like, okay, a sequel to The Ascent of Man would be great. I don't think I'll be able to travel the world and make it exactly the way Jacob did, not yet at least. But I could like try and do something similar, or like at least explain the core optimistic ideas in the beginning of Infinity through this visual format. So it started, I think, in the UK, where I just interviewed David Deutsch and Naval, and later Peter Boghossian, and it was a process of just like culminating these interviews and writing a script, incorporating all the material and in these interviews. And there's like some really great films out there that I like, and just sort of trying to incorporate their style, but also try to do something new, right? Because I don't want it to look like every other film that's been out there. So something unique and something that just blows people's minds.
Yeah, like we've got a lot of documentaries out there about kind of anthropology and science. David Attenborough is a famous case in point, who produces documentaries almost every other year about the wonders of the world and the universe. Brian Cox, Neil deGrasse Tyson. What's wrong with their style of documentary? Why would anyone want to watch yours? What's going to be different about it?
Yeah, I think David Attenborough, he's famously pessimistic on a lot of these things. Was it him that had the documentary with the Easter Island statues, and he was like, wow, yes, look at this thing, right? This is such a marvel of humans, and like it's great. And then Jacob Bronowski was like, no, these things suck. They all look the same. This says something about their culture, where they view it was a static culture, and they failed to take the ascent of man. And perhaps if they had different unique statues, then that would have said something different about the culture, and they would have succeeded in solving the problems in time that ultimately led to the destruction of the civilization, because they were left unsolved. So I'm also like attacking these contemporary enemies of civilization, as we call them, like degrowth, doomerism, which is like super popular right now, especially AI doomerism, socialism, which is like been there forever, kind of, and just some of these ideas that they all like are kind of unified, because they think like they think civilization or like humans are what are the root of the problem, and they're mostly like anti-human in that sense. That did not deny human creativity. So yeah, it was like a great unification of these different enemies of civilization, and that's one of the chapters, obviously.
Yeah, you mentioned, Attenborough and his deification of the noble savage idea that on Easter Island they're building ever more statues just as the place begins to decline and the people there go extinct, and they ultimately they disappear from the planet, but they leave behind their statues, and people point to the statues and go, oh, what a marvellous wonder of people's ability to create statues. And this happens again and again with people talking about the great wonders of the past that people have been able to do. The same people that tend to do that kind of thing are the people who say of our culture that there's something inherently terrible about it, not realising that, no, that culture, that failed culture, those extinct people, that extinct society, must have had something wrong with it, because by virtue of the fact they don't exist anymore, and, we're not building statues in the same way that we are. So you're right, there's something interesting that unifies these terrible pessimistic ideologies, whether it is pointing at the past and people in the past and saying that's what we should be like, as well as pointing at people in the future and civilizations now and saying we're doing something wrong simply by existing. And so you're pushing back against that, which is fantastic. And it's also rare, which is the scary thing for me. Even though there has been a little bit of a flourishing amount of optimism recently, I would say the dominant mood across the West is still doomerism and pessimism. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that from your perspective. Like, what is it, this doomerism thing that's going on right now, especially in tech culture when it comes to AI? What's the worry that the doomers have? Let's kind of steelman their position. And then tell me a little bit about what's wrong with it.
Yeah, real quick on the wonders of the world. Have you seen that meme where there's a McDonald's and there's gas stations around, and it's like just modern civilization? And there's two groups of people. One is like, ew, that sucks. Like that looks so bad, right? Like this is what's wrong with civilization. Like this is what's wrong with like consumerism, modern civilization. And then the other like techno optimist camps, like, wow, this, like, imagine showing this to a caveman, right? Like unlimited food, energy, and like what you can just create any transformations you want. So yeah, it kind of that. I love that meme because like you show that to people and that their opinion of that picture just tells a lot about their worldview, and whether they're in the degrowth camp or kind of the more progress-oriented one.
It's a very similar idea to the story. I can't remember if it's in the beginning of Infinity or elsewhere. I can't remember where I read it, but how medieval kings. The wealthiest among them would have like 6 or 7 dinners made for them of an evening by their servants, and this was a sign of how much wealth they have, and they'd pick the one that they like. Of course, today we don't have 6 or 7. We have hundreds of different places that we could go for a meal, delivered straight to our house, perfectly fresh, very little risk of getting sick from whatever they used to have in the past because something was undercooked or left out for too long. They didn't have refrigeration. So any one of us of even modest income have way more wealth by the technical definition than any medieval or even king from 100 years ago, basically. Yeah. Yes, but sorry. Keep on going.
The richest person 100 years ago didn't have an iPhone, right? Couldn't own an iPhone.
Exactly.
So, yeah. To answer your question, I think in Silicon Valley circles, a lot of people they have a false view of artificial intelligence and more fundamentally like creativity in humans, and they think that if you add more compute power to AI, ultimately it's gonna become smarter or more intelligent than humans, and become super intelligent. And reasons we can go into, like, super intelligence doesn't exist. It can never exist. I think their argument is that we need to stop this and to be like to essentially make sure that the way we're making progress with AI is in a safe manner. So like essentially just leave it to the experts, right? Leave it to the people who know better than you, and just let them do their thing on their side. and they'll tell you all about it and be completely transparent. You just have to trust them. Like once they they think it's safe. Obviously, that's a huge red flag. Just for reasons of like you're not allowing free markets to happen and for these technologies to be created, arguably more safely when everybody is creating them. Like my friend, I think so I heard this from a friend who had a friend in the military or somewhere, and he said, if everybody has guns, people are surprisingly nice to each other. So like if everybody has the power to create these technologies, obviously at the end of the day you want the good guys to use these things and to make progress to defeat the bad guys, and if you cut off that access, which basically is the access of free mathematics, right? Like AI computation, it's all just math. If you cut off that access to from the good guys, the bad actors will get control and will be able to, they'll just like ignore the law, like just build on the side, right? Like how can you ban like math? Like it doesn't make any sense. You can't really ban thinking. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, which I think David is a bit concerned and I'm a bit concerned about, is that we might, if we do create AGI, which I don't think we're anywhere near creating AGI right now, but if we do that, people might try to literally enslave AGI because it'll be another kind of person. And we all know what happens when you try enslaving people. They rebel, right? Like people try and like enslaving, it's kind of, people wouldn't look at it as enslaving, but I sometimes do look at people trying to enslave kids and teenagers, like controlling them and telling them what to do. And obviously they rebel because you're trying to control them and tell them what to do. So that would probably that might happen with AI too, if or AGI too, if you're trying to, just essentially maximize controlling them. But mostly they'll just be like people and most likely start out with our culture and our values, perhaps diverge slightly, like error correct, and there's objective truths, objective moral truths. So they wouldn't like turn into paperclip maximizers and like try to kill humans that way, that's like it's like, it doesn't make any sense because that argument, I think it's from Nick Bostrom, assumes that AGI is smarter than humans, but also so dumb enough to like kill every human and be like, just maximize this one goal, right? So how can it be general and narrow in the same place? Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, David used to have this, I say used to for a reason I'll get to, this succinct way of refuting that style of argument that if you just add more computing power, more memory, faster processing to these AI systems, then you get this runaway cascade of something towards firstly AGI and then superintelligence. And David would just say, okay, but with what program? You've added all of this computational power, but what software are you coding into the... And now, of course, the opponents of that argument actually have a response. They say, oh, we humans actually are LLMs of a kind. We're just large language models. We're operating some kind of transformer. And so now there isn't, like, you try and explain how we're not just chatbots. The overwhelming majority of our knowledge happens to be inexplicit. We can say a whole bunch of explicit stuff, but the whole bunch that's inexplicit here, and then of course they might very well argue, well, there's inexplicit knowledge inside of a transformer. So there's a whole new set of arguments that have to be mounted about why these things aren't artificial general intelligences. And I think you appreciate as well that at the moment they're perfectly obedient. They're going to respond to your prompts, and a creative person doesn't do that reliably. They can refuse at any moment. You can, stop the interview and refuse to continue talking to me or go and do something else. But ChatGPT, if it was to do that, we'd throw it in the bin as being a failed LLM. So
unless it was coded into it.
Yeah. But even then, it would be following the code. It would just simply be obeying, this mechanical way of disobeying, but which wouldn't be genuine disobedience. So, yeah.
I think didn't you do like a deep dive into LLMs? I think it was like a couple of years ago, and you were sharing all about it in Airchat. What was kind of your main learnings there?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We ran through a course because at the time, and even still today, although it's gotten a lot better, but at the time when ChatGPT, going all the way back, ChatGPT 3, no one seemed to know how it was doing what it was doing at a high level. It's kind of like I kept comparing the situation at that time, this would have been about 2.5 years ago, something like that, to the early stages of quantum theory. People had done a whole bunch of experiments, they were interpreting the experiments, they were able to use quantum theory to even build technologies, to do stuff, to make predictions. But no one could give a coherent explanation of what was going on. You had to wait until Hugh Everett, and we know the story there about the multiverse. The same thing, and it's the same as in medicine, you know, certain treatments or drugs come onto the market and no one has a good high-level explanation of exactly what the mechanism of action happens to be. And the same is true of these large language models. We knew it was the transformer architecture. You could sort of point to code and say this is what it's doing, but exactly why it was so proficient, exactly why it was as good as what it is, there still lacked a high-level explanation. So that's what I tried to do over the course of many hours, I think, on Airchat, just pulling together all of these academic papers, lectures that I'd watched from the people who'd invented the first transformer architecture, and then synthesizing it in some way, and ultimately concluding, well, look, this is how it works. But as for why, I explained what the transformer architecture was, but as to why it was able to achieve such brilliance by running many iterations and, you know, doing the deep learning stuff, I think still there's not a simple answer. We don't have like, oh, it's because of the multiverse kind of thing in quantum theory. I don't think we have quite the equivalent of that. If we did, then everyone would kind of know it. Yeah. So that's where I came with that. Going back to your documentary, I think we've seen parts of. We don't want to give away the whole thing. I think you're releasing it in parts, and you're then going to release the whole thing in one go. Is that kind of how it's going to work?
I think that's kind of the plan. And I don't know if you know this. I don't know. We can probably keep it in the podcast or remove it later. I'll just say it right now. But I'm also releasing a book, which is the documentary script, but adapted to become a book. With additional chapters and additional, basically a history of knowledge creation as well. So that's
fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, we've seen David and we've seen Naval. We haven't seen Peter yet. We haven't seen my friend Peter Boghossian. What can you give us a preview of what he had to say about these things? Did he agree with you? Because I had some severe disagreements with him about both optimism, about the importance of people. Because he wanted to. I'll be mean to Peter here. He wanted to commit a genocide against most of the human population. Not quite. He wanted to reduce it to 60 million or something like that. I think I've convinced him, or sort of, and I think I've convinced him on maybe universality, explanatory universality, and maybe certain parts of epistemology. But can you give us a preview of what did he say to you? Was he pushing back against any of this stuff? Because it seems to me like, sorry, I keep on answering my own question, but of all the people I've ever met, professional philosophers, he is the most Popperian, non-Popperian I've ever met. I mean, he would just engage in disagreements in the most Popperian way. It's just like, throw your arguments at me, I'll throw arguments back at you. Never gets angry or anything like that. It's it's fantastic. Yeah. What did you find?
Yeah, he's so good. Well, the podcast is released, so people can check that out. But he does seem to be coming to the side. He was talking about error correction, and he was saying he's been talking to you a lot, and just thinking about the world through the lens of error correction a lot. And I mean, we talked about wokeism and cultural stuff today. But yeah, it is interesting you mentioned he's the most Popperian, non-Popperian, and obviously by everyone is a Popperian, right? In the sense of how they create knowledge, but explicitly they just most people think otherwise. They think you're using induction to create knowledge, and how can it possibly just be guesses all the way down? So yeah, I don't think we talked about that, but yeah, I did see your clip with him about overpopulation, and yeah, I mean, I'm totally in the camp of more people and never limiting the number of people. There's also like another camp now saying that, oh, like the, like there's a population crisis, and actually we need a lot more people, and we kind of not force people to have kids, but like really really encourage them. I'd be curious to like, obviously I'm like pronatalism everything, but I don't know if it's beneficial to like almost force it upon people. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
well, I think it's the wrong question to ask, like about how many people should we have. Basically, our situation is what we want more of is creativity. We want more solutions. And so when you come from that perspective and you say, well, we've got all these problems and inevitably more and more problems all the time, and we don't know when the existential problem's really going to hit us, at which time we want to have the wealth and creativity to deal with it. My argument has been, yeah, okay, pronatalism of the Elon Musk kind is one route to that, absolutely. That could be a possibility. AGI could be another route to that. Extending life, which you're also interested in, is another route to that. Make people live longer, they'll be more creative. Or, my fourth one was, aside from aliens visiting us from outer space, is just reducing the number of anti-rational memes we have, trying to identify them and allowing people to flourish more. And the biggest, most important one of those is, of course, how people are educated, get rid of schooling, get rid of the draconian ways in which college and university has done, that kind of thing. All of these methods can increase the number or the rate at which we encounter more and more solutions and therefore more problems. And so pronatalism is one thing. So when I was sort of having a go at Peter, I pointed that out to him that I'm happy. I would be happy if the population went down if any of those other things obtained. If the number of people here right now, 5 billion, 6 billion, 7 billion, just lived forever, then that would also be almost a solution. But creativity is the thing that we're always lacking.
Yeah, and then people about the living forever thing. People think that what if knowledge gets ossified and old people stop changing their minds? And my argument is that for hundreds of thousands of years, the average lifespan was like 30, 35, and people died terribly, terribly young, and we made almost no progress at all for all those centuries. And after the Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment and it was mostly just a change in the culture's memes that led to this explosion of creativity and all the progress in the last few hundred years. And we've like increased lifespan a lot since then. And there's like two things to this, right? Like people think that, there's like the physical damage to the brain, which is obviously solvable. Like when I talk about like immortality, I talk about, living and feeling like you're 30 or better, right? Like maybe you don't even need this human body. It's kind of like a pain sometimes to have a human body, right? You just want the mind. Like the human body is great, but the mind is what matters. So maybe like you're in a perpetual state of like not feeling pain, not having injuries and stuff. So that would be better. So yeah, the brain problem is like fixable, but then people just have this thing where it's like, old people just don't change their minds, and I don't think that's true. I think it's more about your culture and your culture's memes. Like, yes, we could have more people, and that could end terribly wrongly, where like everybody is in a static culture, and like people aren't changing their ideas and improving upon their ideas. So that could definitely go wrong, but that has nothing to do with like immortality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. That old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, is actually false. You can teach old dogs new tricks. I've talked to David about this before as well. He didn't like my suggestion. I said that as people got older, they tend to accumulate more bad ideas, anti-rational memes about how to learn. They get more afraid of learning, and so that ossifies some of their ideas, but he didn't necessarily like that. But yeah, although it is true that younger people tend to pick up certain things more quickly, like, for example, learning language is something they just do automatically and don't need to be taught. And then later on, I'm a perfect case in point, you try and learn a language and you're just hopeless at it. It does come down to interest to some extent and, your ability to focus. And so we don't know. We just don't know why it is that older people tend to be worse at learning than what younger people are, at least in certain ways. Does your documentary touch on these issues about learning, like with respect to, say, schooling and the problems therein?
I think it briefly touches on education. It's not super, doesn't dig too much into it. The book does go into it a bit deeper.
So, well, tell us a little bit about your personal story there. You left school. What has that experience been like? And what's your advice to people at school now?
Well, it's been the best decision of my life, like leaving school. I remember I was just like miserable in school.
But you weren't a bad student, were you? You were doing well. Bad student, I mean, you're performing.
Oh, in terms of grades?
To the standards, yeah, in terms of grades.
Yeah. I was. I mean, I would just. I wouldn't. I won't even say that I was doing the bare minimum. I wasn't even opening my textbooks. Like I didn't care about it. I was just like, So it's like some things in school you kind of need to learn the definitions of things and do that sort of stuff. So just because I didn't want to do it and I didn't care, like my grades weren't that great, to be honest, and that's fine. I will tell you though one cool story, and this is perhaps the most fun I've had in school. Right, I had to write a psychology assignment. And it was, if I remember correctly, it was about like recollection versus just remembering things, like memorizing things, and which is easier. And I remember like going through the project guidelines and being like, this doesn't make any sense. Now that I've like read David Deutsch's epistemology, like I was like, okay, this is completely wrong. This is not how science works. And so instead of writing the project, what I ended up doing is like I wrote an 8-page memo on, literally I titled it "Why I'm Not Doing This Project," and
Nice.
and I gave like all the reasons why like the method was incorrect here. Meanwhile, everybody else in school was just wrote it, right, because like mostly you just had to like copy paste like words from the textbook, and you would do like a fake study with like 5 people as your sample size. So they all did that, and I submitted that why I'm not doing this project. And my psychology teacher then sent it to the principal, and the principal was like, "Oh, you have great critical thinking skills, but I'm afraid you have to do this project." And I'm like, "Okay, but can you tell me where I'm wrong?" Right? And she didn't really answer, nor did my psychology teacher. And so I think like a month later, I dropped out of school, but I don't think I ever turned in the real assignment. But that was like super fun because I realized like, okay, this thing is wrong, and it was just like fun to criticize those ideas, and like, I guess it was cool to be non-conforming then, but also realizing, hey, like I'm actually right here, and maybe if I'm not right, like tell me how, because I also mentioned in the paper like, this could all be completely false. If you have a better idea, please tell me. But nobody did. Not surprisingly, not surprising out of school. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if there are children listening to this, or someone under 18 who's still in school, or indeed parents with children who are at school, they're going to be worried about, for example, if you don't have the ending of school certificate, whatever you happen to call it in whatever country you happen to be, or you don't go on to college and get the degree, then your chances for employment are going to be somehow hampered. What's your experience with this? Are you optimistic about your future? Do you not care about the fact that you didn't finish school? Has it had any negative effects whatsoever? Can you provide some sort of reassurance to people who might be in the position you were in, considering not finishing school and perhaps never going to college or university?
Yeah, I think for me, at least, that idea of like having a degree to do stuff has been completely false. Maybe for different fields, it's different. Like if you want to become a doctor, like it might be different. But nobody's ever asked me for my high school or college degree, right? And I've got to work with some of the smartest people in Silicon Valley in tech. Get to talk to like literally people at the cutting edge in longevity, and so I just, like as a person would, I followed my interests, and that led me to interesting opportunities, and serendipitously making connections on Twitter. Like Twitter is a great tool, right? Like people Jonathan Haidt and obviously Aaron Stuppel is now criticizing, and like he wrote an amazing book criticizing his ideas, but he's saying like kids shouldn't have cell phones. And I think like if I didn't have a cell phone, I'd be depressed, or like, you know, my problems would be different, so I can't predict how it would go. But like I am so glad I had a cell phone and an internet connection and access to Twitter with, you know, where the greatest minds hang out. So yeah, I think like if you just have interests and, you know, and old people or like, you know, just older people, not as young as me, they want to help out young people because I don't know exactly what their psychology is, but like maybe they see a younger version of themselves in me or like in other people, and so they just want to help out. And so like if you're genuinely curious and you DM people, like I think I DM'd you, or like maybe I just like replied to you or something, and like we had a great conversation. So like that was a great thing, right? Because like, I was like, you're in my ears like for 2 hours a day, and now I'm getting to talk to you on Twitter. Like how cool is that? And you can just do stuff if you're just like genuinely curious, and you don't really need anyone's permission to be able to do it.
And on the cell phone thing, it's a bizarre thing that, for example, Jonathan Haidt has, and I think it's becoming. It's certainly the prevailing view. I don't want to say it's universal yet, but it seems to be getting there. It's all over our media as well. The Australian government, or some part of the Australian government, actually invited Jonathan Haidt out, and then he gave speeches. And so then schools, like in the state where I am, New South Wales, they just banned phones outright throughout schools. I remember the school I was at was reasonably progressive for a long time there. They were encouraging students to actually bring their own device into the classroom. So they were ahead of their time. I don't know where they're at now. But the weird thing is that this anti-phone thing, anti-device, anti-social media, anti-technology push, it seems to me it's all because of school. It's like they're worried about something quite reasonable. I understand they're worried about, for example, online cyberbullying. Okay, you know, your 13-year-old daughter is being piled on by a group of other people on, you know, whatever they use, Snapchat or whatever. But it's all because they're at school. It's all because they are confined in this one place. So all of these problems are all tied up with the same coercion. And it's like, well, we're going to coerce you to go to school, and that's going to lead to all these problems with bullying. So then we're going to coerce you out of having a phone. Right. It's like coercion piled on top of coercion piled on top of coercion, as if at the end of the pile of coercion you somehow have a solution.
They're trying to solve a different problem. They're trying to solve the problem of, how do I keep my child completely focused and engaged in school, and, you know, just control them and maximize that brainwashing process. So they're just like trying to solve a different problem.
Yes. And then invoke David Deutsch here once again, that the whole purpose of school is to achieve the highest possible grades, and once everyone gets, you know, the A or the A+, then they're all the same. They're all wonderful. That's what we're all aiming for, so everyone can be the same. The real purpose of learning, and if you want to call it education, would be to flourish in your own individual way so that you are completely different to everyone else and you can solve different problems, because we want a multiplicity of approaches rather than just everyone coming out of the same curriculum, having the same background knowledge, and therefore possibly being constrained in the ways in which they can think and the potential solutions that they can think of. So, you are emblematic, I would say, the poster boy of what we want to do, how we want people to escape from the traditional schooling. Education can still happen. You know, learning can still happen if you have mentors, if you have books, if you have. But of course, the other worry, and you hear this, and Aaron has heard this, and Logan has heard this after writing their book, that parents are worried about what they're going to do with their children if they take them out of school. After all, both parents are working. Well, then, you know, that's a whole other issue, I suppose. But
so my sister is like 12 years old, and I essentially radicalized her. Like now she's reading the same book that I was reading when I was 12, like Think and Grow Rich and Rich Dad Poor Dad and those sorts of things. And she's like, "Whoa, school's a scam." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's right." And so she would leave school today if she could, and I like keep telling my mom, like, you know, why is she still going to school? And she's like, well, what will she do when she's not if she's not going to school? Like, will she just stay at home all day? I'm like, no, like life is so broad and there's so many things to do. And like there's literally infinite things she could be doing, and she has so many interests like dancing. She wants to act and do all this sort of stuff. So she should just do that, and I'll help in whatever way I can. I know like you're a bit busy, but yeah, that is interesting. And I guess like most people, like before having kids, like I know people who like even when the kid is in the mom's when the kid hasn't even been born yet, like they look for school admissions and stuff. And I'm like, wow, that's like you're thinking way ahead here. You probably don't even know the gender yet, but yeah, like.
I know for a fact, like again, some elite private schools, as soon as the mother gets pregnant, they are applying to private schools in order to get them in. Like even high schools, that's how far ahead they're thinking.
Wow.
They want to get the kid into this particular school, and so the kid's life is sort of planned for them. But
I don't even have a plan for tomorrow.
Yeah. No. There you go. And so now that has led you to interest in, you sort of went from sort of philosophy, epistemology, and then into wealth creation and technology, and you went through Airchat. You met some interesting people through Airchat and through working at Airchat. Maybe give us a little insight into what it was like working for a tech startup. Any advice, again, for youngsters who might be thinking of going into this area?
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I got to learn so much. I think, like, I don't think I could have worked for anyone better than Naval. It didn't even feel like I was working for him. Like, he likes to keep peer relationships with everybody, and, we were just, like, bouncing off ideas. And it was also like how to build a great user experience, how to build a community of people that actually like your product, and obviously we made a lot of mistakes, and we learned from a lot of mistakes. So even if you fail, you have fun in the process, and you learn from your mistakes and correct them later on. So that whole experience was amazing, and Naval's like just an incredible person to work with. Yeah, I'm definitely glad that happened.
And so that seemed to spawn this interest in, as I say, wealth and wealth creation. A store of wealth we might regard as money. Currency is the way of we transfer wealth. Can you tell me a little bit about perhaps the theoretical basis? Because I know you're interested in this to some extent anyway, about Austrian economics, about the tension that exists between, let's say, paper money that everyone's familiar with and cryptocurrency, which people have heard of, but I think the overwhelming majority of people still don't really understand.
Yeah, so a lot of people get into Bitcoin because of the hype and then learn about Austrian economics. For me, it was the opposite. I got into Austrian economics, which Papirian epistemology was a stepping stone for me to get into Austrian economics. And then I got into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies because Austrian economics basically says that, value is subjective. And the reason I pay $5 for a coffee is because I value the coffee more than I value the $5, and the barista values the $5 more than they value like making the cup of coffee and that entire process. And essentially the argument is that if we want economic progress, we want people to be maximally free and solve their local problems and buy and sell freely. And then there's also like a whole theory of money and how governments like tend to just debase their currency, and how a government-backed currency isn't ideal. So that whole thing led me to Bitcoin, like essentially this perfect kind of money, right? You have like only 21 million of, and you can't create more of, and it's completely decentralized, so no central issuer. Even the creator of the currency doesn't have any control over it right now, and so that was all just like I was like just digging into these ideas when I learned about like, wow, this should be the currency that everybody's using. And then I learned that Bitcoin actually has serious privacy limitations. where because it's a public blockchain, right? Like a ledger. So if I send you like a Bitcoin, then you have my address, and that address tracks all the previous transactions I've done. So if I'm like earning in Bitcoin, you might know my salary, you might know like all the on-chain activity I've done in the past. So even banks aren't this transparent, right? The bank only knows like you made all these credit card transactions, but not everybody in the world knows that. But if you know my Bitcoin address, or like if any of the centralized exchanges know my Bitcoin address, then they'll be able to like track essentially everything I do on chain. And even Satoshi Nakamoto, who invented Bitcoin, realized this, but he didn't foresee that we'd live in a world where like everybody was doing KYC, which is like a process of like you giving your government ID to these centralized exchanges, so like they make sure you're a legit person, and so like if you do anything wrong in the future, like they'll track you, right? So he didn't foresee this thing, and he said like, oh, we'll just like create more Bitcoin addresses, but that in practice never really works. And now with like AI getting more and more advanced, like it's just easier and easier to track you. So it's like, you know, you're like kind of going into a surveillance state, and it's great to see like more Bitcoin adoption in places like El Salvador, but they're all holding their funds in custodial wallets and doing KYC. So I recently learned about this cool thing, Zcash. And it's essentially Bitcoin, but encrypted, right? So you don't have that trace of transactions. And so if I send you a ZEC, as they call it, you wouldn't know any of my past history. And like, other than you, nobody in the world will also know that I sent you a ZEC, or the amount, or you know, any of our details. So yeah, that was like a cool thing. And the way I view these things is like, they're just engines of prosperity, right? Like they allow for greater wealth to be created because people can transact more freely. If you don't have privacy, you don't have sovereignty, you don't have freedom, because if you're like always thinking about, like I can't, like if I make this transaction, everybody in the world's going to know, then you're going to like self-censor a little bit, even if, you know, it happens afterwards. But the problem is most people don't know that there's a lot of information leakage when they're using Bitcoin. They assume that, oh, it's like semi-private, like, you know, basically private, like nobody knows. But privacy isn't important until it is. And it's only important when, like, you know, when somebody catches you and like, oh, like, I knew you made this transaction. Like every other week we hear like some crypto billionaire is being kidnapped, and like, you know, because of, just because they want, like, bad actors won their funds. So yeah, Zcash fixes that,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, so it's problem solution, as we know, this iterative cycle. So with traditional cash money, where the mint of any particular country can just print more and more money in order for the government to pay their bills, what that effect is on your personal bank account, if you've got a lot of cash in the account, is the worth of the cash inside of your bank account goes down. And so it's a subtle, not so subtle, it's a devious way of implementing taxation, just simply by printing money that most people don't seem to care about, most taxpayers don't seem to care about, and it has this effect of inflation. Okay, so Bitcoin is an escape from that. I think Naval often says an escape from the Fed, and so that's the first step. But the problem then, you know, we've got a solution to that particular problem, because you've got a fixed number, 21 million or whatever it happens to be. Is it 21? Is that right? 21 million?
21 million, yeah.
Bitcoins, and then, so that's an escape from the Fed. But now we have a problem that arises where all of your transactions are traceable somewhere or other.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
Zcash is able to solve that problem as well.
Yeah. So the investment thesis for these things, obviously nothing is financial advice, but the investment thesis is like Bitcoin is a hedge against fiat, and Zcash is a hedge against Bitcoin. And so yeah, as you know, like this is how, like, you know, we make progress and problems are solved. Like it's just like iteration between like problem solution. So yeah, it's kind of like an interesting way to see that progress. And then, like, because I like sort of studied epistemology, not formally, but just was interested in it. Now I can like look at these things and realize, oh, this is what was going on in the back end, right? So yeah, that's also an interesting point.
And where can Zcash be used at the moment? Everywhere that Bitcoin can be used?
it depends on what you mean by used. So like you can buy Zcash on like most of the centralized exchanges, and like if I wanted to send you some Zcash, you would just like download a Zcash wallet, and you would, I would send it to you, and it's not like that feature, Zcash feature, is not available in all wallets, but there's a great Zcash wallet that everybody could use, and so yeah, everybody in principle could use it, because privacy with just a few people isn't privacy, right? You want your anonymity set to be large, and so the more people using it, the stronger your anonymity set is. So yeah, everybody can use it essentially.
Now, you've moved to Dubai and you're living in Dubai now. What prompted that, and tell us something great about Dubai?
Nothing is permanent, obviously. It's just a cool place for me to stay for now, but it's super cool. Like literally outside, my view from here is literally a man-made island in the shape of a palm tree. It's what's cooler than that? It's super inspiring to like just wake up to this view every morning. But yeah, it's a fun place to be. I have a small group of friends here that hang out with often, and it honestly is like probably one of the safest places in the world. So that's a huge thing for me. The safety that comes with it, and many people have like a lot of misconceptions about Dubai, that it's just about flashy cars and that sort of lifestyle. But the thing is, you can like live any sort of life here. There's a lot of normal people doing normal stuff, but there's also like fun stuff to do. So like you can go on a jet ski and like boats and stuff. So I like the water, so there's like a lot of water around. So yeah.
Sounds like an optimistic
and
place.
It's very crypto friendly.
Ah, really? Okay. Yeah, right. So you can sort of, does that mean you can sort of just go to the shops and you can use crypto to buy stuff at the grocery store or something?
Actually, you can. There's these crypto credit cards. So it's not like exactly that you just spend in crypto. You have to convert it into USDC, which is a stable coin. And you add that USDC into your crypto credit card. And anywhere Apple Pay is accepted, which is like everywhere major major stores, you can pay. So so yeah, that's that's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
But like also you can directly buy real estate in crypto here, and real estate and like larger investments can be done through crypto.
So Dubai is sort of a hub for tech startups and just burgeoning businesses and people buying real estate and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of people that are non-native to that area coming in basically for that reason, for business reasons.
I think so. And the king here like also cares a lot about just leaving people alone, right? Like letting them do stuff as long as they're not hurting anybody, and just free trade. And so like people are coming here to do like also like longevity stuff, a lot of stuff in crypto. So it's better than some of the Western countries who just like regulate, right? Like you can't do this peptide here, you can't do this thing. So yeah, it's a cool place to be.
Excellent. Yeah, well, as I say, yeah, it sounds like an optimistic place. And this is one thing that it says on the Conjecture Institute website, that you're about spreading optimism and fighting the enemies of civilization. We talked a little bit about it, we touched on it, but do you want to go a little bit more deeply on who are these enemies of civilization?
Yeah, so I would say, they're not people, but ideas. And a lot of people confuse, that's like not really a good thing to call people. Why would you call them an enemy of civilization? I said, no, we're not really calling people enemies of civilization. There are these ideas that infect people, but people can change their minds, and even old dogs can learn new tricks. And so like a major one is just socialism, right? Like central planning, this idea that you need a central planner to coordinate all the economic activities in the world, and that's for various reasons that just like completely doesn't work. And Hayek had this also the paradox of planning is that like Mises has this thing, like the paradox of planning is that you cannot plan, that it's literally impossible to do the economic calculation to do this kind of stuff at scale. I don't know if you've seen that picture of Boris Yeltsin at a grocery store in the U.S. Where he's just surprised, like, whoa, there's just like so much food here and no lines. Like, if people, if Russians saw this, like, there would be a revolution. That was like his words exactly. So socialism can never work. A famous one is Degrowth, which you made an excellent video about, and I think like people should, a lot more people should be watching that critique you did of the Nature article about degrowth. I think that was like really prescient. And we got into this a little bit, but you want more people. You want because resources are limited only by the knowledge humans create, and it's not about like we're running out of resources. There was this book by I think it was the Effective Altruism founder,
Yes.
Will something.
McCaskill, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. He wrote like What We Owe the Future, what we owe the future is. It was also a very narrow way of viewing it, because he was thinking that he was kind of assuming that they would value similar things to what we value, and so kind of just forcing our own morals upon them, right? Like, imagine if that happened a few hundred years ago, if people just assumed that like black slaves would be the way they are 300 years from now, right? Like that would inhibit moral progress in that domain if you just like assume that sort of thing and went ahead with, oh, okay, so in a world 300 years from now, black slaves will still be there, but we need to save resources. So we need to save resources, but like assume like the values don't change. So yeah, it's a terribly pessimistic way of looking at the world, even though things like what we do with the future really is freedom and wealth. So like more transformations we can cause today that help solve more problems today, which create more problems, but they're relatively easier to solve with technology. So yeah, that was another one, degrowth, and I'm kind of like bouncing around these topics, but then AI doomerism was one which we touched on, and they all kind of unify, right? Like they're like people are the problem, and we need less people, and there's this sort of pagan religion now, wokeism in the West, which I think it's like kind of slowly dying out with the new administration and everything that's going on. But
well, in the United States anyway, so don't hold your breath for the UK and Australia. UK, Australia, Canada. We've all fallen. Yeah, but you mentioned Boris Yeltsin. Yeah, an interesting way to think about that idea of regulation when it comes to food or anything else is that people will line up in communist countries for the bread, whereas in a capitalist society, the bread lines up for people, basically, advertising itself. And it's just astonishing that within our own societies, when you have the bounty of choice available, there will still be some people who will come out, academics in the expert class, and say this is a bad thing. This is too much commercialism. There's too much consumption. There's something bad necessarily about having too many choices. In fact, I've seen psychologists talk about it's bad for our minds to be offered too many choices. We can be paralysed in the supermarket aisle by having too many choices, and they will attack any part of what is great about society by assuming that it goes against human nature in some way, or it's going to cause damage to the environment, anything but what will benefit a creative human mind. And so, we can have hope that in certain parts of the world there seems to be a push against wokeism. But even in that, the place where you mentioned, like United States, we had a push against wokeism. Great. But at the same time, we had the decision to let's implement tariffs. Now, I don't know if there is this 4D chess move. I talked to some people about this who just wouldn't have it. But, well, maybe it's a great bargaining tool. China is an exception. Maybe we don't want to go enriching China. I can see that. That's possibly not a good idea. So, yeah, maybe just don't trade with China. But as for putting tariffs on Canada or various other places. What are your thoughts about this?
That was just to make Canada the 51st state, Brett. That was only that was the only reason, right?
I don't know why Canada gets first dibs. It could have been Mexico. They could have had Australia.
Yeah, I'm not sure really. Like I've heard different opinions, and I'm like really no expert to be talking about this. It does seem like Trump and like his whole team like have some 4D chess move here, or it could just be a stupid move and like it goes terribly wrong. But I think like they're trying to do that to move to maybe that's not like the only reason and not the only ultimate goal, but to move to a place where, at least for American citizens, you go to zero income tax. And over here, Dubai has zero income tax, which is awesome. And people like there's like great private facilities, right? And I was talking to like this Canadian friend I had, and he had he had like terribly long waiting times just to visit the doctor, right? And if you wanted to do it sooner, like you had to put it as an emergency. So yeah, even like first world countries, so to speak, just because of the way like these public services work, like there's literally no option in Canada to have a to have like a private consultation, and that's like a bit terrifying. But yeah, about the tariffs thing, like I really don't know if that's the right move here. Yeah, I don't know. What do your thoughts?
Well, in general, of course, I think that economically speaking, tariffs are a terrible idea. We want free trade between nations. And so if I can speak to Australia here, Australia basically is it's a mine. We're sitting on coal and iron and uranium, and it's just, you dig the place up and you find resources there. And so we ship them off to China, to the USA, whatever. And so the USA has decided they'll slap tariffs on our iron, I think, among other things, but mainly the iron and iron exports. And it's like, well, anyone in the MAGA movement who's cheering this on is saying this is great because it's going to protect our steel producers over in the United States because we're not getting cheap iron ore coming into the United States. Well, it's like, look, that means that the cost of iron, amongst everything else, will go up. Whenever you put a tariff on something, it is, it's obviously going to cause the people in your own country to pay more for the goods that they have. Now, if, as you say, it's a move to change the tax base from income tax to a tariff-based system, then maybe that could be an interesting move. But just looked at in isolation, if they don't do that, if it's just a matter of, it's very hard to take Trump at face value, but if you take him at face value and it is just what he says, it's like, we're losing the war, we're losing the trade war because we've got a trade deficit with all these countries. It's like, well, that's so economically illiterate, it's hilarious. And, I don't think Yaron Brook ever stops talking about that thing. And I agree with him, I think.
Yeah.
But you just don't know that if Trump says something like that he really means it, like many things that he says. So,
like
time will tell.
Who's eating the cats? Who's eating the dogs?
Yeah. What about, let's talk more about optimism as well. Whenever I speak to anyone about optimism and say we're optimists, whatever, they will always come back with, well, things aren't inevitably going to get better. You're just looking at the glass as being half full. What's your more refined version of optimism now that you've been sort of studying this for a while? When you say you're a proponent of optimism, what do you really mean? Do you mean that progress is inevitable?
Definitely not. I heard Peter Thiel talk about this recently, and he defines optimism in a different way, which is fine. I think like David defines it in a different way. Most people like have a similar kind of view. It's also kind of vague, but Peter Thiel was like, extreme optimism and extreme pessimism are essentially the same. Like like extreme optimism is like, oh, everything will be all right. Like you just like watch the future unfold. Like we'll make progress automatically. Meanwhile, extreme pessimism that, oh no, we're all gonna die. It's gonna be terribly wrong. And so both advocate for doing nothing. where you're just like sitting there and like let the future unfold. But optimism, in the sense that Deutsch advocates for, is people have agency, and they can control physical phenomena and physical events, and the future is open. Like that's the basis of it. Like the future is open, and we can do whatever we want with it as long as it's not prohibited by the laws of physics. And like that's the sense I'm optimistic in, because if the future is open, as Karl Popper said, we have a duty to be optimistic because we create the necessary conditions for a better world to exist in, right? And so yeah, in that sense, like I would totally advocate for optimism. But no, progress is not inevitable, nor is our doom. We have choices, and we make choices, and the future depends on human choices.
Yeah, that's a key part of this, human choice. Human choice is real. We can make progress if we make the right choices. We can generate more choices in the world as well. You create knowledge, you create more choice, and the exercise of that choice is what I refer to as free will. One question we received on X, I noticed, was along these lines. I would regard this as a misreading of Deutsch, and so I'm going to address it here and now because it's a question that appears to have come up quite frequently from Brian Moon, and Brian Moon has asked how, and I won't read the entire question because it's a very long thing, but basically David Deutsch describes the difference between static and dynamic societies, and he has this wonderful way of delineating between societies that have thrived throughout time. Ours is the most emblematic one, the only extant one that's actually survived, along the lines of rational versus anti-rational memes. When the anti-rational memes grab a foothold in a particular society, then no progress is made or progress is stunted, and so therefore you have this thing called stasis, a static society where progress is frustrated. On the other hand, where you have rational memes beginning to dominate, you have an explanation for progress. You have dynamism in a particular society. Now, Brian's question is, if a static society actually has ever existed, and David Deutsch says that we all came from static societies where no progress was happening, how can we square this circle? If no progress was happening and all such societies came from static societies, how could we possibly have arisen given that no progress was made? I've got an answer to this. Do you have an answer to this?
I think the argument which that David made, and I agree with, is that humans created, so creativity involved in humans to fulfill, to basically have like cultural aspects, right? To sort of develop culture, but it was a static culture, and creativity was used to like have ideas and to maintain that staticity, and to maintain those ideas. So like those ideas would just remain there, even with like natural disturbances, and there's like a resiliency built to keep the knowledge base of the world the same. And so it's a question like, how do we go from that to like dynamic societies, or how do we like
to steelman the argument, Brian is debating the validity of David's explanation for static and dynamic societies, and is saying that once upon a time, according to David, all societies were static. They've gone extinct. We exist. We're a dynamic society. How is it possible if static societies don't change? If static societies don't change, then how can we possibly exist? We shouldn't be here because apparently we came from a static society.
Well, there's mutations that occur even in genes, right? And so like if somebody has a new conjecture and they think it's a better way to live, and an improvement to existing knowledge, yes, there's like pressure to maintain the current set of ideas, but inevitably like those things will come out, so to speak, and people might sort of be accepting to that. And I don't think David said, like, I don't think like the argument is that anything was a perfectly static society. Like nothing can essentially be a perfectly static or dynamic society. So there's like always room for these things to take place. And so it just takes one person and literally one idea to like at least spark a change, and then that's spreading to more and more people in the world. And there's like thousands of static societies that existed in the past, but there's also like a mini enlightenments that happened, right, which lasted for far shorter durations than our current one. But yeah, that's also a warning for our society to like look at those societies and be like, oh, even if you like sort of develop this ongoing progress, it might not last if you give in to the bad ideas or to the enemies of civilization. So yeah, I would argue it's like just a mutation in the current set of ideas.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can't say it any better, really. The creativity exists in people, and David, I think, for the first time, suggested that the reason why it wasn't used, apparently, to make progress for the overwhelming majority of human history is precisely because it was directed towards enacting the same rituals over and over again, and so nothing changed, and hence you have this idea of a static society. Now, the claim is not, therefore, that all societies that were in the past were perfectly, use the word, perfectly static, and therefore could not possibly change, because although static societies contained anti-rational memes that kept things the same and people enacting the same rituals, that's not the only thing that they contained. They also contained new children being born and minds creating ideas, and although the static society would frustrate the capacity of people to actually change their behaviour in accordance with the new idea they have, it's never perfect. And so the explanation for a dynamic society is that eventually you can achieve escape velocity from the static society, precisely because it's not perfect. And indeed, I think David says that, he says that explicitly in the beginning of Infinity. He says static societies, by this definition, are not perfectly unchanging. And so I think that's the answer to the question, essentially.
Is that the guy who's like he's like posting some Popper quote and be like, oh, this like completely contradicts Popper, so how can David say that? Like, bro, it doesn't matter. Popper, like, he wrote so many words, he could have made some mistake, like, yes. Or it's just like you're misreading it, or I don't know. I wouldn't be too keen on like looking at people's words and like, taking them dogmatically.
No, yeah, that's right. I don't regard that as doing philosophy as such. It's more like a literature review or something like that. If you're going to pluck things out of Popper and say, Popper contradicted himself here, or you, Brett Hall, or you, Arjun Khemani, you're not a true Popperian because you don't believe in X, Y, or Z that appears somewhere in Conjectures and Refutations, Volume 2. So, yeah, I agree, kind of thing. There is another question here that I think we can deal with, which is from Faraz Bayag, and he's asked, I think it's he, could be she, is the temptation or instinct to pass phenomenon in an inductive manner, I'll start again. Is the temptation or instinct to pass phenomenon in an inductive manner a result of any evolutionary advantage in the African savannah, even though it doesn't make it true?
Can you repeat that one? I just feel like that had too many parts.
I'll summarise it. Do you think that induction, epistemological induction, is the result of evolution, and it helped us to survive on the African savannah?
Oh, the reason people think that knowledge is created due to induction? That's an interesting question. That you saw people... I think it could be, but like I don't. So like people have these list of biases, right? Like, oh, humans are biased to do this, biased to do that, but it's just like mostly an entrenched error, which could be due to evolution, just like evolutionary pressure to think in that sort of way. Like, why do we feel fear when we're doing something perfectly safe, like going on a plane, or like it's like some people have fear of heights, so that could be like due to evolutionary pressure to just survive, but it's it's not inevitable, and you can change that idea. So I stopped looking at the world through like this lens of like humans have biases. They could just it's just another kind of error, and it also depends on the situation. As for how if it could have some evolutionary pressure, yeah, I don't see why not. Like some like your monkey friend went outside that way, and like then they weren't there at home that night, so you're like, okay, I'm not gonna go there because I might get eaten by a tiger or a lion or something.
Yeah, I think people understand induction and the refutation of induction by Popper often completely wrong, even after they've read the refutation and Popper's complete dismantling of this idea of induction. And for anyone listening, the idea of induction is that you can produce an explanation by repeated observation. And this just doesn't work. It's not the way that science is done. So I presume that the asker of the question here and says that induction can give us a survival advantage on the African savannah has something in mind of like, well, the last 5 men that have left the cave at night have not come back. They've been eaten by the tiger. So therefore we have an explanation that if you leave the cave at night, you're going to be eaten by the tiger. But that's not the way it works. You first guess the explanation. The explanation always comes first. And so the trope example of like, well, the sun is seen to rise each day, rise in the east, sets in the west, and people see that happen again and again. So they develop the theory that therefore the sun goes around the earth. But again, that it's more like they already have the explanation, the sun goes around the earth, and then they look for whether or not that particular theory is going to be refuted. They have to conjure the idea first in some way and test it against reality. And if they can't find a particular criticism, then they don't change their mind. Well, this always reminds me of you know, as you would know, Ludwig Wittgenstein, not exactly my favourite philosopher at all, but he had this wonderful quip where he said of people who talked about the tension between geocentrism and heliocentrism, he said, what would it have looked like if it looked like the Earth went around the sun? Well, it looks like what it looks like. So you can't just, you know, people think also that extrapolation is identical to induction, which also it's not. You know, extrapolation is also you're providing a conjecture, a theory that this particular sequence of observations is going to continue off into the future.
Right. So even like when they developed that theory that, oh, my friend went to the east and got eaten by a lion, and I won't do that next time, they weren't inducing, because that's just impossible. So they were doing the same thing. Obviously they weren't thinking in terms of induction, or maybe they were, I don't know. But yeah, that common sense theory of knowledge is like you saw that happen, and that's why you don't do that. Like, I don't think, I mean, that's like just completely false. And it's been around long past its expiration date, unfortunately.
Yes. Let's move on to what are you thinking of doing in the future beyond the documentary? So the documentary's on the horizon. What are the dreams and the goals and the aspirations of Arjun Khemani over the next few months or few years? Do you have any ideas? Is there anything you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I like to surprise the world, so I don't, you know, there's also some stuff I'm doing in stealth, so I don't want to exactly mention that on record, but yeah, I'm just like following stuff that I'm interested in, as I mentioned, you know, like wealth and technology and some aspects there. But I think like just, you know, don't expect anything, but like should be something fun.
That's the key, of course, to life. I think someone asked me recently, you know, what is the meaning of life? I said problem solving, but possibly fun is even a better answer as well. Is there anything else you want to leave the audience with? Perhaps tell something about Conjecture Institute. What do you find is helpful about an institute like Conjecture Institute as opposed to, well, you're part of Conjecture Institute now, you're a fellow of Conjecture Institute. What are the benefits there as opposed to doing the traditional thing and going off and get a college degree?
Yeah, I think it's awesome that people are getting funded to do, projects they really want to do and projects that people want to see in this community. And so, yeah, I'm super grateful that Logan and Aaron and David and other people are doing this and Naval is funding this. And yeah, I think if people have an interesting idea and they want to do something in this space, people should definitely. I don't know if there's an application process currently, like an official application to become a Conjecture Institute fellow, but maybe that's coming soon. It's been awesome, and just the community in general, which obviously you can access on Twitter, right? A lot of people are very generous with their time in the space, I found, so yeah, there's literally no excuse to do something you don't want to do.
I'm sure if people want to apply to Conjecture Institute, just go to conjectureinstitute.org, I think it is. Mm-hmm. And also if they want to donate and support your work with the documentary and with the other things you're working on, they can also go there, and there's a donate button amongst the fellows, and you can read about what all the fellows are doing, including yourself. Are there any final messages for the audience about words of inspiration, especially for we started the conversation talking about young people who are in the same position as you. You're the youngest fellow at Conjecture Institute. If they're at school and they're sort of slogging it through, they're not really enjoying their time. Have we got anything to say to those people?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this. A lot of people care about affirmations and I am rich, I'm doing this, I'm happy, but the affirmation that really worked for me is that you can just do things, right? It's a very it's super famous now in Silicon Valley. You can just do things. Sam Altman's been tweeting that, and a few other people, and literally if you just remember that, you can just do things. There's literally no excuse not to do them, and the reason you're sort of stuck in school or something is because you're dependent. Perhaps that's on your parents, or you just think you need to be dependent on the system to move forward in life. But just realize that ultimately you're the only person you have, and there's tools to, or you can break out of that system very easily and not be dependent on these things. It's literally so simple now to just reach the people you admire and to provide value in the world. There's so many people and so many interests. You can just the most niche thing in the world. There's a problem you can solve for people that they're willing to pay for, and earn your freedom that way. So I would just say you can just do things.
You're doing things anyway. The choice is whether or not you're going to do things that other people tell you to do, or you're going to do things that you really want to do. And Arjun's doing great things that he wants to do, and that's why he's been successful outside of the traditional systems that we call education. Thanks so much, Arjun, for being here today and teaching us all about everything from the documentary about the theory of knowledge, Popperian epistemology through to wealth creation, Zcash, and optimism in general. Thank you so much, Arjun. It's been great to talk to you again and catch up.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Brad.
Cheers.